Right, welcome everybody to this meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. I will go ahead and read the opening script as we hope that a few more members will join, but we do have a quorum at this time. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Is being held by video conference. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating via Zoom as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full names for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name or who acts inappropriately. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Sarah Boyce?
Here.
Peter Brace?
Here.
Matt Fee?
Here.
Don't see Ian Golding yet. Vince, have you seen Ian?
No, but two members just joined.
Yeah, so we may have a member come in. Fritz McClure?
Yes.
Joanna Roach? Joanna, are you joining?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just quickly going to change the name and I'll be right with you.
Yeah. And I don't see Gary Beller yet at this time.
Gary here.
Oh, thank you, Gary. So I apologize for my video. The very wonderful and welcome bright sunshine is messing with my screen. So if I'm not able to see you, it's because there's glare on my screen. And unfortunately, I'm a little bit gray on the screen. You're not able to see me very well either. I will try and fix that now that we have daylight savings time changing the angle of the sun in my room. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Vince Murphy?
Here.
And Holly Backus?
Present.
Okay, we do not have any anticipated speakers on the agenda. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the list of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. And for any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And for items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Vince Murphy, to be read into the meeting record. His email address is vmurphy@nantucket-ma.gov. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. All right, thank you all for attending this morning. It's wonderful to see many members of the public here with us, and thank you to the committee members for agreeing to the additional meeting on short notice. That is much appreciated. First item on our agenda is the discussion of the workshop that was held March 7th and 8th on the Coastal Resilience Plan. What were some of the experiences and takeaways and next steps that we can proceed with from that event? And Vince will give us a brief overview of the event and what was covered. Vince, if you want to go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Mary. I'm just going to share screens. And while I'm doing so, some members of the public need to display full names. If that's okay, please display your full name. Otherwise, you may not be able to stay. Beg your pardon. Okay. This is it. Now then, Mary, while I'm running through this, could you please keep an eye on the attendees or yourself and Peter or whoever?
Yes, of course.
Just so to admit anyone else that comes in.
So you want to go up to slide 1 on the presentation.
Okay. So this is going to be very brief and very quick, just give an overview of it.
And you're not in presentation mode. There we go, Vince.
Is it okay now?
Yes, looks great.
Thank you. So I just want to give a very, very quick overview of the 2-day workshop that took place on March 7th and 8th. It was a very useful 2 days, to say the least. The purpose of the meeting was to have a workshop for staff and representatives from regulatory boards to increase their familiarity with the CRP and CRP-related issues, and to build consensus among staff and boards around the Coastal Resilience Plan and ways to move forward. There are 40 recommendations. We just need everyone on the same page, basically, or in the same boat. And to have some team building exercises, that was another very valuable part of it. Over the 2 days, we had 33 participants each day. Some were revolving participants from some boards that didn't have staff that could, representatives that could attend. So that's great, fine. We worked around it and found ways to have people attend part-time, so we had constant representation from some boards, which was very, very welcome. We had representatives from town administration, natural resources department, Department of Public Works, Planning and Land Use Services, Sewer Department, the Water Company, the Airport, Land Bank, and Nantucket Conservation Foundation. The boards that were represented were the Select Board, this committee here, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, thank you in particular to Peter Brace, Historic District Commission, Finance Committee, Planning Board, Conservation Commission, Shellfish and Harbour Advisory Board, and the Nantucket Land Bank. We did have a public gallery because we had a posted public agenda meeting for attendance for the Select Board and this committee, because there was potential for quorum for both. So we had a public gallery, and reporters, members of the public, and representatives of special interest group and advocacy groups were all noted to have attended and were extremely welcome. This is what I want. Just a quick look to see the agenda for the 2 days. I'm not going to read this. It was a comprehensive way to see the contents of the CRP, look at the issues surrounding it, look at the issues surrounding implementation, and look at how we're going to start to move forward amongst departments and amongst support from various boards, the issues that boards may come to see over the next several years, and try to build consensus. That was one of the biggest things to do for the 2 days. I'm just going to quickly show some photographs because everyone likes to see photographs of these kind of things. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, that's next. Just to say that all the attendees that were present were broken into 2 groups. Group 1 worked on its own stuff, and then group 2 were working the same thing at the same time, and then we present backwards and forwards to each other as necessary. So the first day, everyone was together for couple of hours as one large group, and we ran through the CRP just to give everyone a basic grounding. Some people had seen the same presentation a great many times. I've lost count of how many times I've given variations of that presentation. Trevor presented the first half, I presented the second half, and that was one of the few large group exercises. After this, after a few exercises as one large group, we broke into smaller groups. But one of the biggest large group exercises was empathy mapping. And then we went into our small groups and we'd work on an issue, then share information backwards and forwards. Group 2 would come over and group 1 would present information, and then vice versa, then work through it that way. This is kind of the setup group. This is group 2. Group 1 was, I guess, for want of a better description, about 20 yards away on the other side of this ballroom in the Nantucket Hotel. And we worked on various things. This was one of the things called the SOAR analysis, strengths, opportunity, aspirations, and results. And thoughts on this were shared backwards and forwards. We also developed opportunity statements. They were modified heavily over the 2 days. And I don't have the final versions, the consultants have that, and that will be in a report that will be generated and made available in the next couple of weeks. 3 to 4 weeks is what we're thinking. Group 1, this is just a picture from the group from day 2 and group 1 doing an exercise called the Thoughtful Threes. This is another exercise called the Crazy Eights, where you develop 8 ideas in 8 minutes, 1 idea per minute kind of idea. And this is how we shared out some of the things. Everyone developed thoughts, put it on Post-its. All of those will be made into a big sheet. and then 3 people come along from each group to volunteer to present them. So that's just some of how it went through. I have to give extremely particular thanks to some people. I have to thank the staff that attended. 2 days was a very large time commitment. I also have to particularly thank the boards, committees and commissions that were represented from the regulatory boards, committees and commissions. That 2 days from volunteers is a hell of a lot to ask, and they gave extremely generously with their time. Particular thanks to the Nantucket Hotel for hosting the event, and I have to give particular thanks to the Arcadis staff who organized this event for the town, and they did it on their own dime. The town did not pay for the Arcadis side of it. All right. There was a lot in this. It's hard to try and give a sense of the outcomes and the discussions that took place. I'm happy to try and answer questions. I see other people present here who were here for the 2 days. It would be very valuable to probably get some input from some of those people, and then try and understand how that we're going to move forward with the biggest topic that was for the 2 days, which is implementation.
Thank you, Vince. And that is exactly where we want to start. For people who were at the event and who are here today, regardless of whether you're a committee member for the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, please use the raise hand feature, because we do have now 32 participants. So that's more than I can see in one screen. And so if you'd like to share some of your thoughts, experiences, takeaways, just your reflection on the event for the members of the public and others who are here. Peter Brace, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I was at the event subbing for Mary Longacre, our chairman, and the biggest thing I came away with was the cooperation effect. Any differences that were there at the meeting that came in through the door disappeared as we all sat down and followed through the program that Arcadis had set up for us. We generated ideas, saw where there were deficiencies, saw where there are things we might not be able to do. And then another thing was that was so important as a member of CRAG was to see that all the departments and individuals that need to know about the plan, they got it. Because we maybe weren't sure as a committee whether the regulatory boards were incorporating the knowledge of our plan and the knowledge that the water is coming into their daily lives. And it was important to see on their faces, to hear their ideas, to hear them talk about how they're going to proceed as we start to guide projects. Basically just to have what am I trying to say, just to know that they're all on board and they know that we got to do this, and it's not just some study that was produced and okay, yeah, we'll look at it later. That this is real and it's happening now, and all the committees and department heads know that they got to play a role. So I thought that was really inspiring.
Thank you, Peter. I couldn't agree more that the commitment of the people who participated and the enthusiastic involvement, if you will, was really gratifying, and I'm very grateful for it. Other comments from people who were at the event, please? And a note for the record, our member Jen Carberg had joined us about 10 minutes after the hour. Joanna?
I also echo Peter's comments. I thought the entire thing was incredibly well done. I was really encouraged by the level of cooperation and commitment from everyone who was there. I thought Vince did an excellent job. And I think that there was a lot of cooperation and a lot of communication. And I think that the folks who are tasked with the actual implementation of this on the town side really listened to everything that was said and participated in a way that really fully supported the town and its commitment and desire to advance the plan. So I was really encouraged as a result of being there. And also, I have to say that it was evident that there were incredibly brilliant and smart people who are committed to the success of the CRP in the room. And after spending as much time as this group has on making this plan, that was very gratifying. So thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Other reflections from people who were in the workshop? Matt Fee, please.
And Joanna, the incredibly smart was your group. I was teasing them all week that they were all the whole 2 days that they were the smart group and we were the workers. We were the dumb group. But so that's why you had that experience. You weren't with us. You were with Peter and I. So you know, I was a little bit hesitant about this when I first read the program. I thought it reminded me of like everyone gets an award. It reminded me like, oh, you don't have to read it and you don't have to do this and that. And Vince did some work and adjusted it. But I was very surprised. I was pleasantly surprised because what it did is it enabled people, it not even enabled, it forced everybody to speak. You know, normally when you're in a group, there's a few people dominate and one or two ideas can dominate. The way they did this forced everyone to speak. And I think it also showed us that we have a lot more in common. We had two separate groups, we had breakout groups. And when it all came sort of out in the end, there was a lot of things that were agreed upon, that funding was going to be a crucial issue, getting started and getting a project or two that show, physically show that what we're talking about to the public came out from both groups. As I said, funding was a huge issue from both groups. And I think, sort of the town figuring out how to build the sort of the framework, the resources, the staffing to continue to do this, and who is going to quote unquote own each project, who's going to be responsible. Those kind of problems were identified continually, and so things like that. There's a role for crack going forward. I think that was identified from both groups, that there needs to be there's a role for a financial group of some type, figuring out how do we equitably share this. There were certain ideas that kind of bubbled up from both groups that I think we may not have gotten to, or it may have taken us a longer time to realize that than to use this process. So I think, overall, our group was tired at the end, and we were kind of sort of laughing, and we sort of had a tough last half hour kind of hitting it, but it was, I think everybody appreciates that we did it, and I think we're going the right direction. I have a lot of faith in Arcadis. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to point out that one of the recommendations from the Coastal Resilience Plan was a Coastal Resilience and Sustainability Interdepartmental Working Group. And I looked at this workshop as a necessary foundation for that. It's very difficult to put together an interdepartmental group when people aren't on the same page to begin with. And so I think this workshop really helped lay the foundation for that, entity going forward. Jennifer, you want to share your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you, Mary. It was certainly an interesting 2 days, from my perspective. I was there representing, the Nantucket Conservation Foundation as a large property owner on the island, as well as, kind of representing all the outside groups that might have funding and projects that could support the work of the town. So kind of on the outside of the town. So I thought that the workshop was really interesting because it gave a lot of insight into how the town works through things like this. So I certainly learned a lot as kind of a private citizen, as far as the connections between the different groups and the thoughts behind how projects get prioritized and what was really clear to me at the end of this meeting was that while there is a lot in the CRP, there's a lot that the town is already doing. And that seems to be one of the most complex things, is how we incorporate our different projects and recommendations and the costs of those projects into what the town is already trying to prioritize. I did hear a lot of support for the continuation of this group or some form of this group as a way to kind of cross between those different departments and keep that pressure on how we do these different projects and get these different projects organized over time. I'm looking forward to kind of the end products from this workshop, because that's what I kind of thought was missing. There was a lot of discussion and there was a lot of big picture ideas of how do we fund all of this? How do we get all the departments to work together? But I didn't necessarily walk away with next steps. And I think that's because there was a lot of work that was going on and there's going to be a final report. So there was a lot that went on in the 2 days, but I didn't necessarily walk away with the feeling that we knew what was going to happen next. So I guess I'm kind of waiting and hoping that there's some really good action items that come next.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Are there other members? Vince, do you have a comment to add?
Sure. So I've just been jotting down little notes as Peter, Matt, and Jen were talking. So this is kind of a little bit all over the place, and I apologize. One of the ideas that we were introduced to early on was no negative ideas and trying not to have negative thoughts on things, basically. There was much discussion on finance. There was one particular idea, I don't want to single out anyone or any one project, but one of the grandest ideas, for want of a better description, that came through over the 2 days was the idea of a bank. That was phenomenal. It was something that had never come up before. It was a groundbreaking idea in some ways, I thought. That and much other discussion in finance. One of the other things that came up a lot was staffing, and people kept talking about the idea of maybe a new grant writer. And then I think in our group, at least in group one, that kind of got modified not to be so much a grant writer, but a grant writer and administrator. You can get all the grants in the world, but if you don't have someone to run them, that's a problem. So I have to look at it from that side of things too. And there was a couple of other things that came out, and I apologize because I can only largely speak for group one. It turns out we're not good at celebrating wins. So we might get something, but how do you get that out there? So one of the ideas was to have a new format, a new venue, or a new way of doing public outreach. And again, I'm only speaking for group one in this, was that we had some discussions of goals and how to get early wins, was the term we used. What from the CRP could we implement quickly to have an early win of sorts? We looked through the plan, tried to look at what could be done, what could be modified, what might come from that. So that was something that was a discussion in group one, at least. And I'm not trying to disparage anything Jen said, because each group worked very differently, but ultimately had very many of the same outcomes. That's what I got.
Thank you, Vince. Is there anyone here today who was from group two that would want to have a similar sort of report back from that group about topics discussed? Jen?
Thank you, Mary. I can add a little bit more, although I think we've touched on some of it. The funding was a big focus that we talked about. And as Vince mentioned, the bank was brought up, and I'll let Joanna speak to that because she was the one that had a lot of kind of brilliant ideas about funding. But one of the things that we really identified was that there was concern about some of these projects and the funding for these projects getting lost in the cycle of how funding happens with town, and that there are definitely issues with trying to line up getting appropriate grants or the town partnering with other organizations that can provide funding within the structure of how town does its budget, town meeting, and kind of the town fiscal timeline doesn't always line up with the granting timeline. So that was something that we talked through figuring out how that could move forward so that the town could still have ownership of projects, so we could also still get the funding in at the right time and not lose out on opportunities, and kind of advance things along. And so, you know, Joanna had some great ideas and you can fill in that bank piece. The other piece we talked about was really the idea of how to identify projects, take the CRP projects and merge them with the projects that the town is already working on, so that every project that needs to have a coastal resilience piece has that in there. And then how to track, how to implement those projects, track them, and how to have outside tracking so that outside groups that want to do projects and can contribute to town projects have that visibility. And eventually we kind of moved into a discussion of the fact that the town doesn't have a great way of tracking projects across departments, and kind of having that collaboration happen. So we talked really logistically about some of those steps that could move forward. You know, one of the things that was interesting in our group 2 discussion was our perceptions of how quickly projects could move forward, and that the perceptions from those of us on the outside were very different from those on the inside. And so maybe some encouragement and potentially some oversight or pushing from this group or outside groups to how we can actually really move forward more quickly on some of these projects that have to happen faster, and make sure that that timeline moves. We continue to move it along. That I think that, I don't know, Joanna, if you had anything to add to that from group 2, that's what I took away.
Thank you, Jen. Joanna, do you want to add something?
Sure. I think, you know, Jen did a great job kind of recapping that. We did spend a lot of time talking about how to finance a lot of these projects because the price tag is so significant. And I think kind of because we were given permission in the sense that there were no opportunities to say no, some larger ideas came out of that. And one of them was we did discuss a bank, right? And also a grant funding mechanism. And so the idea really was, should we pursue some kind of a, you know, credit union or community development fund or community development foundation, where the money that's in Nantucket, whether it be from, you know, nonprofits who want to put something up or equity investment firms who want to put up money, that money could then be lent back to the town at a return on the investment, but they would then be investing in the infrastructure that benefits them, right? And that maybe a portion of that investment could be diverted into like a Nantucket fund, where the grant process often requires matching funds from an NGO, or a way to access dollars quickly in a financial circle, say, where the town doesn't always have the ability to do that because we are encumbered by, you know, municipal procurement regulations, right? And so sometimes that slows down this entire process. So the idea of having a bank that would lend money back to, and I'm using the word bank loosely because it may not take that form, but an entity that could lend money back to the town to invest in its own infrastructure and then provide a return for the people who invested in that funding mechanism. And at the same time, in a parallel way, develop some kind of a grant fund that could go through the community foundation, where there would be an individual group of people who would be helping to administer and propel grant writing forward. Because I think both groups fully recognize the importance of being able to use federal money, and also wanting to get in line as quickly as possible for that federal money, because in many ways we're ahead of other communities in terms of the plan itself and our ability to act, even though we might all find it slow at times, our ability to act as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Joanna. Again, Holly Backus, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was in group 1 with Vince, and I think we just from my perspective as a planner, one of the key things that I kept on saying, and I think a lot of other folks were saying it too as well, is this is a living, breathing document. That's what plans are for. They're not to be created and sit on a shelf. So I think grasping the concept that although this plan was representing projects from a 50-year time frame, that the fact that we do have projects that we can identify sooner rather than later, accomplish sooner rather than later, but also that there's that flexibility of saying, well, you know what, this was a project that we want to do within 10 years. And you know what, maybe that's something we don't want to do, or we want to revise it. That's the most important thing to get out of it, is that, yes, it could be so cumbersome looking at the entire document and all these plans, but that they can be tweaked, if you will, as things go on, as time progresses. And that can also be helpful for our funding mechanisms. There are, as you probably all are aware, there are some priorities that have been pulled over from the HMP, which, as your HMP person, I'm very, strongly and I'll remind folks that we need to make sure that we have crossovers between plans. And so there'll be some projects that Vince and I will be teaming up together to hopefully get some of those federal and, if possible, state funds. So that was kind of, I think, important, just kind of grasping. I did like the fact that Arcadis really allowed us to think from the short term, midterm, and long term, how and each steps, because this is really a lot of work to really kind of pinpoint where do we start. And having those discussions, I agree, Mary, that this was a good foundation for how we're going to have these internal work groups with obviously town staff, but also the board. So it was a great event, I think.
Thank you, Holly. So I'm going to open up to questions. Ann Bruckner had a question. And if you're able to unmute and ask your question, just a reminder to everyone, we are not taking Q&A through the chat. We're not really equipped to record that. So you do need to ask your question verbally.
Yeah,
if you're
I can do that. Yeah, I know how to do that. No, it was just a quick clerical question. I didn't count. How many people were actually participating in that workshop? It looked like maybe 40. Is it that many?
Vince?
We had 33 each day. So if you take away the 6 people that were from Arcadis, from the town, then that would be what, 27 each day. And there was the total number is probably a bit greater, but that was the kind of representation each day. But say, sake of argument, I don't want to pick on any one board, but it's just how it worked out for this one board. HDC had representation that could attend for part of day 1 and part of day 2, 2 different people, but still adds up to 33 each day.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice. Very optimistic report. Thank you.
And just to note that there were public observers, but there was not public participation in the workshop. So there were a few other people who may have been in the room at any given moment. So any other questions or comments from people? That this is our opportunity to sort of share a bit of what went on in the room with it in a discussion format. I will note that our next meeting, March 22nd, we will be discussing the grant opportunities that we're looking at right now, and also the future for the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, what that will look like. So we will be following up on those 2 topics next week. Other questions or comments, either from participants or from members of the public who joined us here today? We do have 37 people on the call right now. If you can't use the raise hand feature, just go ahead and unmute yourself, since we are open for public comment right now. Annie Menz?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I appreciated the comment from Peter about the fact that we have real and happening issues right now. And I just wanted to let everybody know that as a Mattocket resident, I walk the beach a lot, and right now we are experiencing much more erosion. We have a house that's on steel girders that's off of the Starbuck Road. And we have at Mattocket Beach about a 10-foot drop, and at low tide, maybe 10 to 15 yards of beach. That's getting closer to Ames Avenue. And not to mention the fact that I don't know what's going to happen for this summer. And because there's very, very limited parking. And you know how, those of you who come out to Mattocket know that Mattocket Beach is very popular. So that's my thoughts and my comments. And I'm just concerned that we have all this discussion going on, but we also have an immediacy issue as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Vince, do you have a response for that? And then we'll go to Sarah.
I was just going to propose an idea that if you wanted, I could give a brief storm report at the end.
Sure. Annie, I have happened to be out at Mattocket Beach a week or two ago, and I was surprised at the amount of parking lot that has gone over the edge. You're right. There's very limited parking now in that lot. Sarah, comment?
Hi, yeah, thanks. So I had a question since I was not at the meeting, and Jen alluded to this about what the end results were. So I think it's great that all the different committee representatives got together, but other than discussion more and what people felt good about talking to each other, to Annie's point, we have a lot of issues that need to be done now. So was there discussion at all of prioritization? Was there discussion? I know the finances is the biggest piece for large projects, but there's, I liked what Vince said about small wins. There's low hanging fruit. There's things that we could do in the more immediacy that's pretty spelled out in the plan. And then I feel like we have a lot of people talk at a lot of our meetings, and I feel like that's really wonderful to for us to be able to hear their problems. But I feel like people like Annie herself, who's attended many of these meetings, want to know that what the action plan is. So we have the plan, we have some ideas, about how we're going to fund things. But I think it would be really helpful, I know for myself, but as a committee member, but also for, the people in the town to hear about how are we going to move forward with prioritizing. And I don't know, I wanted to hear if that was addressed at all in the meeting.
Thank you, Sarah. Do we have someone who wants to respond to that? Vince?
To some extent, like I was trying to say earlier, it was addressed in group 2. We did look for the idea of an early win and what projects might we get out quickly. So it's something that we're very much looking into, and overall, the purpose of the workshop wasn't to try and focus on who's going to do what and when. That's somewhat largely spelled out in the plan itself. But the purpose was to try and get an understanding for the town staff and town departments and committees that they're going to have to do stuff, and trying to get the plan and information from the plan in front of them so they can start to consider this. I wish Trevor was here in some ways. Trevor and I shopped this around to so many departments and boards, committees and commissions. And unless you're constantly dancing in front of somebody saying no, 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 people tend to forget. And that's kind of the thing that I've learned over the last couple of years, is that I have to try and keep stepping it up and try and keep pushing it forward. But there are plans to try and get something out early.
Thank you, Vince. Matt, you had a comment?
Yeah, I would just say, I agree with Sarah. I think, we'd love to know what we're doing, when and how, and who's going to do it, all that stuff. But I think this was a step toward doing that. And I think getting the various people in the room and getting people to agree on certain issues, mainly that we need to figure out how to do this, and we want to do some stuff right away, and we've agreed on that. That was the first step in making this work. I think getting a couple victories in the short term, Vince is well on his way on 3 or 4 of the things he can do. I think getting some of that and building momentum, and this was is important. And this is sort of one of the steps toward that momentum. So I think in that way, it was very positive.
Thank you, Matt. Other comments or questions from anybody in attendance today? All right, if there are none, thank you. We have a high of 37 participants today. We really appreciate everybody's interest and And the fact that the community is taking this seriously and looking for action, that is a wonderful result. The next item on the agenda would be public comment, not specific to the workshop. We will check and see if anybody else has comments that they want to offer. And then, as I said, you can use the raise hand feature, or since we are asking for public comment at this time, just go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question. I'm not seeing any. So any new business reports from the various constituent boards and Natural Resources Department? Vince, you mentioned a storm report.
Sure thing. So very briefly, and I'm trying to get to as quickly as I can. I'm just over the weekend just gone, we had a bit more of a blow than we were expecting, at least on Thursday and Friday when I was looking at the weather forecast for Saturday night. So the wind conditions did pick up. We were somewhat lucky that this weekend just gone, it was largely out of the west and then swung around to the northwest. It spared the South Shore some of the worst effects. Is it okay if I put one or two pictures on screen from the area that Annie was talking about?
Yep, go ahead, Vince.
Sure. So yesterday evening, hopefully this will work. I went to check out some erosion hot spots and see what they look like. This is what Annie is talking about. Can everybody see this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to make this bigger. This is the Chicago Street parking lot. I took a few photographs. Hopefully, am I cycling through them? Can people see this changed?
Yes.
Okay, these are the two that I took. I did a quick measurement because I have a measuring spot up here. We lost about 6 feet. Roughly speaking. The DPW, I think, looks like they've moved back some of their jersey barriers and the big wooden log. I think they're in a new position, but I'm happy to be corrected on that. And then Annie sent me some pictures this morning from the base of the bluff of what that looks like. This area certainly has problems. Annie, I think, said something like 10 feet. I threw my tape down, I came up with 7 feet. It's still a hell of a drop. And that is not safe for people to get down at the moment. I don't mean to constantly harp on the same things. Beach condition changes with season. It is distressing to people to see that beaches do get very narrow in the winter, and then they tend to broaden out again through the spring and all through the summer. This will also likely slump down, this bank face, over time, and the town has ramps and such that we can use for beach access, and as beach width comes back as the season changes, that will make this area more usable for the summer season, hopefully. Can't ever guarantee these things. The other areas that I checked yesterday were around Sheep Pond Road. There was no noticeable change there. I also got to the sewer beds yesterday down at Surfside. No noticeable change there either. I have my recording locations and they were basically unchanged. Maddocket did get damaged in the last couple of weeks. This is a very broad observation now, but every weekend for the last 8 weeks, we've had a storm. It is really weird. Maybe it's just something that I'm not used to, but that's just a very casual observation on my part. And some areas are suffering. But when I went out Smith Point yesterday, the beach there is enormous by comparison to what it was 2 years ago when there was no beach access, because there was a comparable 6-7 foot drop, just like what I showed on screen. But right at the access point, that has come back and is perfectly drivable, and the beach is wide there again at the access point and out onto the point itself. It is just the seasonal variation, but that does not in any way take away from the concerns Annie expresses that this change is distressing. It is a public car park that now is half the size it was maybe 3-4 years ago, and that there's still something that needs to be done. And Matt alluded to it. I'm working on many things, including 1 or 2 ideas for this area, but at the moment, they're just ideas.
Thank you, Vince. You had also sent me a note about the NOAA sea level rise viewer being updated. Do you want to talk briefly about that?
Sure, I was super happy about this. So I don't have it ready to share on screen. I don't think I have it ready.
No, we can put it as a topic on a future meeting. This is just
No
a FYI.
So as you might all be aware, about 3.5 weeks ago, thereabouts. NOAA updated their sea level rise projections, and it was kind of on a global and then regional for the US. The Northeast was about as granular as it got. There was a couple of cities that were called out in particular, but that was about it. Then what they have done is they have adjusted their sea level rise viewer, so that if you go to the NOAA sea level rise viewer, I've shown it on screen here many times in the past. What you used to see was the 2017 data. Now there's a little drop-down menu that shows you the 2017 data and the 2022 data. We've had an update. It is different. There's no two ways about it. Instead of showing 6 scenarios like the old one did, the old version doesn't show 6 scenarios anymore. They just got rid of the low, and they now show 5 scenarios for 2017, and they show 4 scenarios interlow through high for the 2022 data. The highest projection for Nantucket in the high for 2100, you know, the ultimate number, kind of worst case of what they put made available, is now much lower, 6.66 feet for the end of century. That's still a hell of a lot to plan for. And if we continue, and it's at this committee's discretion to some extent, to use the NOAA high scenario, we've only dropped a little bit. We've gone down from 9.25 to 6.66 feet, but this is the refinement you kind of get over time. It also has an adjustment in the scaling as well. It accepts that there's been 0.43 feet of sea level rise. And forgive me, I cannot remember offhand if that was from 2020 or up to 2000, but it does accept that there's an adjustment of 0.43 feet, and I just have to remember that and correct the time frame. I can give more accurate information and screenshots from this at a future presentation.
Yep. Thank you, Vince. And that is also a reminder that the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee does have a recommendation on file with the Select Board, which they adopted, and we need to update that. So this is definitely part of what we will consider as we formulate a new recommendation. I also want to give a shout out to the Youth Climate Committee. They appeared at the NHA's Food for Thought lecture series and spoke about climate change. So that is available on the NHA's YouTube channel. And Sarah, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about International Women's Day. I wasn't sure if climate change was covered there, but thank you for representing there.
Yeah, sure. I'll just give a brief. The International Women's Day, the topic was sustainability, and actually the conversation was thoroughly about climate change, climate action, and climate justice a lot. And so it was a really great conversation, really great group of people in the audience. So it was a conversation, and I don't know, I know it was recorded by NC17, the TV station. So it'll be aired at some point, but it's really interesting because not only is it, you know, just I'm one of the panel members, but the audience really, it was a really great conversation about what people are interested in seeing, and at the kind of local level too.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other reports from our various constituent committees? Vince?
Hate to give early information, but I have found that table I was referring to for the updated information. If you wish, I can put it on screen.
I think it's better within a full report, but if you have the link, perhaps we can include that in the minutes so that people can research that as well from the link. Okay, if there are no other updates, I wanted to mention our next meeting is next Tuesday, March 22nd. According to our schedule, we would then have a 3-week break until the second Tuesday of April, which would be our next regularly scheduled meeting after that. We have a lot on our plate. So I want to thank everybody again for scheduling this on short notice. We will see you next week. We'll have the agenda out later this week. And we may want to look at April's calendar and decide how frequently we want to meet, given the number of topics that we have to discuss and take action on. The future of the committee is a particularly urgent issue because the Select Board is going to be releasing their call for committee membership. And we need to make sure that what we think should happen with this committee and what our commitments individually are to this committee are reflected in that call. Just for the public's background, the current membership terms expire June 30th of 2022. So we just need to make sure that we know what we're doing going forward. So that is definitely on our agenda for next week. If there are no other comments, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Thank you, Matt. And Joanna, was that your second?
Yes.
Okay. This be by roll call vote. Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce, Sarah,
Aye.
Peter Brace,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Fritz McClure,
Aye.
Joanna Roche,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.